Hey everyone, Sean here, and today I wanted to really sit down and talk about one of the first games coming out in 2023, specifically January 20th of this year, and it is indeed a Nintendo Switch exclusive, Fire Emblem Engage. And I gotta say, this Fire Emblem main title came out with some rather vivid impressions, to say the least, and it was indeed time to engage, but was it that a fun time as a whole? You'll find out in today's review. Before I crack open this review wide open, I'm gonna make a number of comparisons with the only other Fire Emblem title on the Switch, and that is Three Houses. I just can't help it, so I'm just gonna give you guys this warning in advance. Engage is overall such an vast improvement over the previous title, appearing to have answered a number of problems from Three Houses, in most aspects anyway, while this game is ultimately a celebration of sorts with the Fire Emblem franchise.
The game celebrates Fire Emblem by featuring iconic characters from various Fire Emblem titles as spirits or emblems in this case. These spirits are equal to that of stands or personas in comparison terms. Essentially spirit companions who help enhance our present heroes, whether it's more power, better magic or healing, or just be a pesky foe against the enemy. Each hero can activate these emblems at any given time for a limited number of turns. Engage does a pretty good job covering a good variety, representing the first game and of course the most recent title. The emblems reside within these rings or bracelets, hence the Engage title and their Engage system, as the ring is a symbol of, well, engagement. And this is indeed the main combat attraction for this time around. It is very reminiscent to that of Tokyo Mirage Sessions, if anyone remembers that game, so at least Tokyo Mirage has some sort of legacy here, which is pretty nice.
Emblems not only offer powerful effects, but also powerful attacks as well to help back themselves up, and all of them offer something different to the table while maintaining a pretty good balance for the most part. Now there are a few emblems that are clearly good, but all the emblems still fulfill their roles nicely. So the balance is pretty good overall with most of these Fire Emblem rings.
Alright, never mind. We can just do this. Bam! Oh my god. Holy crap. Of course, that also depends on which hero wields that emblem. You can assign any emblem to any hero, so you can have fun with the combinations and effects to see which works for your style. With that, the overall combat experience comes out a lot more flashy while having polished looks and great fun. The game features a new class called Martial Monks, as this time around. They decided to combine the brawlers and healers together as a means of providing more martial arts, a reason to stay on the battlefield along with the rest of the units. The brawler side of the combat is always a fun way to take control over the enemy ranged units, as the weapon triangle allows them to overpower them while looking badass doing so. On the topic of Fire Emblem's renowned weapon triangle, this time around, while the damage is left untouched, I believe for the most part, please correct me if I'm wrong, you can break weapons away from the enemy units, meaning that during the next attack after the break, that unit cannot counterattack no matter who attacks them. This definitely adds more intensity on the battlefield, largely if the enemy plays their cards right. Depending on each unit type, there are a few exceptions, such as armored units being immune to weapon breaking. While yes, weapon breaking is a big part of the game, weapon durability does not apply to most weapons, while stabs being excluded from that. Other features worth noting including the difficulty options, as newer Fire Emblems have the casual feature and time crystals, so you don't have to worry about infamous permadeath if that's something you want to avoid or make annoying mistakes like myself. Engage also features cameos of other heroes from same titles via bond rings, which are basically lesser rings that feature some effects but aren't as powerful as the emblem rings, so they're more for like collecting than anything in my eyes anyway. This Fire Emblem also is the first to debut smash weapons, heavy weapons that attack last but brings the damage and pushes the targets back in space. Of course, in gameplay terms, with all the mentioned features and other combat related features that I haven't brought up, it all adds up for an updated, flashy, and colorful combat experience. Speaking of colors, allow me to shift the subject over to the other main attractions for this video game. Let's talk about the looks of the game. The graphics on this title is just pleasing and colorful to look at this time around. One of the biggest pleasers in this bit are the faces. A note worth mentioning in my eyes anyway are, well, the eyes. Not only they boast that vivid anime style, but they actually convey that eye twitch that simulate that natural human characteristic, giving that feel that we're not looking at some soulless looking figures, much like in the Three Houses side of things. That is only further complemented by the improved facial animations during the cutscenes. This alone makes the in-game cutscenes and support cutscenes a lot more of a pleasant experience to look at anyway. Now with that said, newcomers may find most of the cutscenes feel cheap as they consist of a flat background and characters talking, almost like a stage play type of thing. This formula has always been around as it was originally in handheld game, all the way up to the 3DS days. I hope someday they can at least improve upon it, like animating the backgrounds for example, add some people in the background or something, animals or anything like that of the sort, make it a little more dynamic in a way if it's possible. Of course, there are in-game cinematic and CGI cutscenes that help the storytelling experience. Of course, the improved graphics and visuals reflect in the combat side of things as well, with better effects and animations. The game overall definitely helps reflect the flashiness in the combat side of things, especially with the addition of the Engage system. With that said, I do have some complaints about some of the camera work during the critical hit animations. There are times where it's hard to tell what the characters are doing, or I just wish some of them get more polish in the camera work.
There is no escape.
I also wish for the mages to have cooler effects whenever they finally get their critical hit in. You know, they do all this fancy casting animation just for the same looking spell, or at least it's not just flashy enough for those crit animations. Continuing the topic of critical hit animations, I just wish that each emblem came with their own crit animations instead of seeing the same things depending on each archetype. I must also mention that the level designs are far more interesting here, featuring various locations that are quite memorable, featuring varying grasslands, castles, villages, temples, and of course the volcano levels that are well rendered here, while some of them have their own gimmicks. Let me also say that they even have recreations of some of the maps from past games. Of course, the character designs are definitely a treat on the eyes this time around for the most part, as Mika Picasso has taken the helm for the art direction of Engage. I was already pretty excited as soon as that news broke out. While yes, the MC's design is silly as all hell, there is context to it, so if you want to know why, it's in the story for the game. But as you play the game, you do come to accept it. At least in my view, it really wasn't that much of a bother to me over time, as the blue and red are not as loud as you see in the poster. But you know, it's the new kid on the block, so naturally people on the internet are gonna roast it for what it is. You know, they want to find reasons to mock something. Even though characters like Yugi and Shoto from My Hero Academia exist. I mean, it can't be helped since Picasso really likes contrasting colors. Either way, Picasso's art style and designs translated pretty well into this game on top of the great graphics. Now when it comes to the emblems, most of them came out pretty good, but characters such as Korin kinda looked odd to me. But that's just me being a little nitpicky. One note I will bring up is that it is interesting to see that they all have the same colored eyes rather than boasting their original eye colors, and I believe this has to do with the fact that these emblems aren't exactly the same heroes, but rather echoes of those heroes.
While we're on the topic of the lore, the story in this game, as it features, spirits who merge with their partners, is nothing short of cheesy. I think that's a key word here, but it's the good kind of cheesy in my opinion. And this is of course coming from someone who was born in the 90s and lived throughout that whole decade along with everything else, right? So I do have my fair share of experiencing 90s and early 2000s anime and entertainment, as these share very similar vibes. The story features the Pepsi-colored MC waking up to a war-ridden world after 1,000 years, and it's up to them to save the world from the evil clutches of the Fell Dragon with the help of the 12 emblems. So with that story already, it does feel like something from the 90s or 2000s. So it definitely gives me vibes specifically similar to that of like Power Rangers or even Kamen Rider, or really anything Tokusatsu series. at that. If you've consumed enough Japanese media at this point, you'll come to recognize this sort of mood. There were definitely times in the story where I felt like I was reliving those decades again, the 90s and the 2000s, even complete with the power of friendship sort of stuff and the believing in the main character, and then of course this is a little more specific with video games, but the villains, the main villain comes at the end rather throughout the story, and then they're just kind of just there as a means to end the game, So that's kind of been the thing throughout the 90s and 2000s, at least to some extent anyway. So thinking about those Sentai vibes, it really made me wish that they just went 100% just Sentai cheese, 100% tokusatsu with the, complete with the long ass transformation animations and with everything every single time.
Let's see what that looks like. The delivery was so funny. Oh man, this is like classic anime stuff. I love it. It's so cheesy, but I love it. Oh man, I don't know about that.
Just like in those shows, right? They always use the same exact animation every single time because people just love to watch it, including kids and adults alike. It definitely made me wish that every prominent member of that cast, including of course Diamond, Alfred, Tamura, and so on and so forth, at least had their sort of their first transformation animation with their partnered sort of canon emblems, so to say. Just like what happened with the MC and Marth, right? That's like the only time we get to really see that transformation sequence. And it would have been fun to watch and continue to watch that throughout the whole experience. Just the point being, just go full cheese, right? Like I said, I would not care in the world. Yeah, I'd just be really happy that they just go all out on that stuff. Despite its overall lighthearted nature and rather being straightforward with that as well, there were some somber moments on top of the humorous and cheesy moments. While Engage's story does make for good fun, the quality of that story overall does fall short in the likes of Three Houses. Engage definitely makes that game look like the Game of Thrones by comparison. Even in the social aspect of things, Three Houses does definitely offer more compelling storylines between each character relationship. Despite that, Engage still offers plenty of entertaining moments from not only the main story of things, but from the characters themselves and the relationships with each other. Sadly, the social aspects in this game were rather undercooked, while Three Houses looked very vast to the point where a number of players complained about it, that it just felt like too much like Persona. But I think this was cut back a bit too much for me in Engage, as I do look forward to these stories unfold with each character, as it is a staple within Fire Emblem, so that's just me anyway. It is very apparent when it comes to the support cutscenes between the heroes and the emblems, as they are woefully short and leaves players wanting more from them.
Roy, 我が国に託されし指輪の紋章師、その力頼りにしているぞ。
任せてくれ。ずっと君の力になりたかった。平和のために共に力を尽くそう。ダイヤモンド。
With that said, there are still good things to take away from, whether these characters are wholesome, serious, or humorous with each other, as they come from various spectrums and archetypes just like previous Fire Emblem games. Now I must say that I did like the fact that the other villains within Engage were prominently featured more than expected and have some good presence and reason to be on the screen, making me feel that they should have added just a little more to help really tie the knot for some of them at least. Meanwhile, Sombron, the main villain of the story, is left more to be desired, as I mentioned kind of before. Doesn't get a whole lot of screen time to really justify his place and role, kinda. To me, he was just kind of just there for the most part until the very end of things. Meanwhile, your units for the most part are very likable in their own way. Now, if you're worrying about like recruiting them or missing out on these units potentially, it's actually rather straightforward, so it's pretty easy. It's not that hard. There's no real secret unit in this game or anything like that, or any stretch of that imagination. Now, amongst the males for units, while this guy is not my exact favorite, I had this sort of like attachment to Bushiron, the big guy, and he had some really hilarious support scenes with his fellow allies. Then again, I really liked Raphael from Three Houses, so perhaps I'm a sucker for big buff dudes who are really teddy bears on the inside, essentially. You could say that Alfred's squad essentially is my favorite kinda, since they're more about like working out and staying healthy, which I can pretty much relate to. Meanwhile, Kagetsu is another contender for my favorite male character. He brings his own flavor of funny. The way he talks, the way he goes about things. He comes from that foreign country or foreign region or whatever, so he does have that flavor to him. So that itself is already very charming, and he definitely brought that good presence whenever he was on screen with his support cutscenes. Diamant, of course, is that cool guy. You can't really hate him, especially when he's voiced by the same dude who voiced Archer from the Fate series. He's just really cool. Meanwhile, though, man, whew, this game definitely delivered when it comes to the ladies, or waifus, if you will. Even featuring Etie, a noble lady with a six-pack for crying out loud. Like I said, Alfred's squad, right? She has a six-pack and everything. They're all about working out and everything, so that's pretty cool for this game. If anyone recognizes Fire Emblem games, you do have indeed the romancing route with most of these characters this time around. I actually had a hard time for me when it comes to choosing between characters like Lapis, Ivy, Etie, Yunaka, and Chloe, so on and so forth. But in the end, I chose Lapis. That's just me anyway. Now this time in Engage, you can pretty much romance whichever character you want, no matter what gender you are. So that's actually pretty nice for people who want to have same gender sort of romances and such like that, or at least in their headcanon anyway, or make them feel at least something from that. Obviously, I put out the air quotes anyway because now, obviously you can't romance everybody, it would become odd, but at least it's something, and you get some sort of like nice little dialogue or whatever, with each character and such like that. Having to spend time with them and such like that. Obviously, so. It is nice though to have romance for most of the characters, and then when it comes to the rest of the characters, who are younger or have some sort of specific circumstances, you just spend time with them and have a good time or whatever, as friends or whatever. Speaking more on the characters, the voicing here was well done, at least in Japanese anyway, as expected.
ここにもゴミ。先生か。
今のこの戦いもいつの日かおとぎ話として語り継がれるんでしょうか。
その可能性はありますね。
The game does offer English voices, so the players can look forward to that option, but boy, does it give a different vibe.
I am, in fact, terrified to the very brink of my composure. The stain on the wall like a human silhouette. The handprints on the windows. The stale air. It is only by force of will that I remain here. Conscious. Not screaming. My dignity hangs by one last thread of decorum. The pride I take in my royal office. That thread is about to snap. Yes, it will snap any moment now. Even a princess is only human after all. So, with that, I'm getting out of here!
Now, when it comes to other points worth mentioning, I just thought the localized dialogue could have been a better written. Sometimes there were, characters like in Japanese saying like "thank you very much," but then it's like this weird, long, drawn-out thing when it doesn't really mean that. It just kind of goes off in a different context or whatever for the sake of the English sort of nuance anyway. So I kind of wish they kind of just like, pull back on that a little bit. There were a number of small instances of localized dialogue not quite matching up with the context of the Japanese dialogue, at least for me anyway. So hopefully, in the future they can kind of like dial in on that and really fine tune it and, kind of have dialogue that pleases everyone anyway. Otherwise, it's not that immersion breaking, but there were times that it kind of like was on the cusp of that. The music here is pretty good overall, but once again, with Three Houses, it kind of has the upper hand here when it comes to music, in my opinion anyway. But at least in Engage, you do have classic tracks and other game tracks for you to play either in the Somniel or, which is basically your home base, or during the skirmishes or side sort of battles. And you can change those on the fly, which is pretty awesome. So you can have like the Three Houses music, you can have all the classic Fire Emblem music, and so on and so forth. You even have like the 8-bit or 16-bit music, which is pretty cool. Some disappointments with Engage do include the social aspect of things once again, specifically involving with characters like Jean, being completely omitted from having support scenes with Anna. Like, what? Especially by the end credits, right? There's artwork featuring Jean and Anna. It's like, what is that all about? So, but meanwhile, in Three Houses, I must say again, had support scenes with like every single combination. So, so every single character had scenes with every other single character. So everyone had a relationship of sorts with everybody, with each other. So Three Houses does have that on lock pretty much, and it really made things really interesting when it comes to the story side of things. I guess it depends on your perspective of things. But in Engage, there are plenty of other missing ones as well, and those are big disappointments because you do wish certain characters got together with certain other characters and interact with each other and have something going on, but you do miss out on that, which is, again, disappointing. But let me say again that all these characters are very much likable in their own goofy ways. They're very charming. They bring something to the table, just like the emblems anyway, with their gameplay roles. Even with someone like Gold Mary, right, who's like so narcissistic and manipulative, it's actually hilarious here, So I gotta say, poor Bushiron.
それからこれを作った私のどういうところが可愛いかというところで
God damn it, man.
心苦しいですが
Jeez, she's going all in, man.
これ以上は食べさせません
めんどくさい。しかしこうなるって分かっていたのに食べてしまった。
どうしたのですお約束できないのですかできないというなら口から手を突っ込んで
Oh
今まで食べた
God.
分を引きずり出しますよ
Other negatives that I like to point out include the menu, more specifically the fast travel aspect of things. It could have been better organized, definitely, as it's just kind of just laid out in a pretty minimal manner. It just doesn't organize like the story chapters and then the paralogs and then this skirmish is right here, that sort of thing. Like all the gold enemy skirmishes should be right here, and all the silver ones should be right here. So on and so forth. It felt like very cluttered. I had to like go search all over the place and then find that specific one, and then go on with whatever I need to do, whether it's just story or side stuff, grinding, or trying to get money or anything like that. The fast travel could have been a lot better, definitely. This game also features a pseudo exploration mode where you can pick up items and talk to your units after each battle on the battlefield. You can also collect bond fragments, which are used for emblem related features from some units, like randomly too at that. Even though the units didn't participate in that particular battle, they still have bond fragments to offer for some reason. I just wish that those units that have fragments on their person are marked with some sort of notification. That could have been a lot easier and save a lot more time as you try to like squeeze out every single little bond fragment so you can like use it to whether to power up something or increase your bond with somebody. You can use every bit of that to really help out your playthrough anyway. I just wish it made things easier here during the exploration mode side of things. So you don't have to like talk to everybody every single time if you really are super sort of precise about that. Engage also has this awkward moments in the game of itself, including for me, I'm going to point out the ring polishing for the emblems. The emblems make some rather suggestive noises and dialogue while doing so. It's just very awkward altogether. But yes, it does increase your bond gauge with whichever characters you want. Of course, the more bond you build, the more perks you unlock for that character. right, for that character combination, including, of course, the special weapons. But I kind of just wish that polishing the rings wasn't really necessary, and they could have they could have done something else to help further increase the bond between each character. Polishing here, man, that ain't it.
綺麗にしてね。そこは恥ずかしいわ。うわっ、どう？綺麗になったかしら。
Regarding to grinding, it does take some time if you're willing to take your units to the very limit with the best build and all. But at least getting there was a fun time for me. With all the awesome, battle sort of animations and visuals anyway, it just looks flashy and very satisfying to hit people, and it felt good doing so. So at least there was a pretty pleasant present time for me. Lastly, on the negative side of things involves with the DLC. I definitely feel this being quite scummy to an extent. More so when it comes to the extra emblems. They should have at least leave some extra emblems in the base game via paralogs or side quests in general terms. While yes, it would be odd for the story since they only count like 12 emblems, but it should have not been that much of an issue. It's just they're just extras. You don't have to include them in the cutscenes. Just like all the units aren't really included in the cutscenes anyway, so why not do the same for the emblems, right? So it's really not that much of an issue, I don't think anyway, so it's really not that deep. Like when it comes to the extra story bits, sure, I guess that justifies for extra money, but the fact that the DLC emblems include like Tiki and the 3 houses and stuff like that, those came out on the very same day the base game came out. So it really seems like these characters were already been made on the ready, so that seems really suspect. And so they have all this like stuff that's already been made during the development of things, and they just kind of locked behind a paywall of sorts. That's what it kind of feels like here anyway. But despite having to say that, I like the game that much, so I just went ahead and bought the expansion pass. Because I just want so much more from this game because I love it that much as a Fire Emblem game.
誰も死なせん。行くと。
Boosh! And he gets health back. That's pretty good.
So ultimately, after beating the main story, plus all the grinding and extras and everything, it accumulated to a total of approximately 125 hours for this game, and every bit of those hours I had a good time. The story was a fun, cheesy time, and of course the combat was so fun as I felt satisfaction every single time I beat the enemy down with my leveled up units. And while at that, you can try out different combinations and such like that with the emblems in each character to try to see how things work, or whatever. You need to have fun with it, right? There's no restrictions or anything like that. You can just pair up anyone with any emblem. You can kind of see like the magic units do some real the physical stuff, and then the physical units use some magic or something like that. It does look pretty funny, or I can imagine it being funny because I haven't done every single combination, of course, up to this point. So maybe on my free time, I'll definitely do that just for the fun of it while I, still level up those units to their max. So yeah, I mean, I just feel this like fun time with this game. It's just so much fun to take these units to the very limit. And I've almost forgot to mention that this Fire Emblem game does offer a online sort of like combat mode, right? So basically you can take your units to the online portion of things, and so that takes even more content to that next level, right? So you can definitely have more time with the game even if you're done with the main story. So if you do feel like a more of a challenge, you can definitely take your units online, battle against other units, from other players, right? But they're CPU controlled, so you're not like actually playing against PvP. It's PvE, pretty similar to that of Fire Emblem Heroes if anyone plays that. So it definitely does offer plenty of content in the long run of things if you're willing to let yourself do so with Fire Emblem Engage anyway. So that's pretty nice overall. There's definitely some replay value anyway. Now, when it comes to in comparison to like Three Houses, that's all about like, repeating the story over and over again for each of the houses, getting those characters done or whatever, or those characters to join you or whatever within that limited amount of days, which you don't have to worry about here. You just grind all you want, you just have a good time, take your time with it. That's why Engage is such a good all-around updated game for anyone to pick up. So if anyone wants to pick up Fire Emblem on the Switch, I think this is the one to do, right? So it's the most updated one. It's very colorful, combat's really fun, it's very flashy, so it's just visual stuff all together, just being very entertaining. You'll have a good fun time with it in comparison to Three Houses. You have to be in a different mood for it, I would say, for Three Houses, because it does offer something different in a good way, but you do have to kind of really sit down and be willing to go through its nuances and stuff like that. So that's just how I feel about Three Houses in comparison to Engage anyway. It's just, good all-around game. Three Houses, it's a bit more of a required taste sort of thing. So with all that, of course, Engage is a pretty good love letter. With all that said, a good love letter to all Fire Emblem players. So with that, I'm gonna give this game. So I'm gonna go ahead and give this game a solid 9 out of 10. It doesn't quite get that 0.5 or even the 10 out of 10, of course, because they did miss out on some increments, such as like the lacking support stuff with certain character pairings or combinations, the menu clutter, some of the crit animations being kind of messy in my eyes anyway, and some just other nuances that should have been fixed to help out really help round out the gaps and make this a good all-around product anyway for that potential 10 out of 10 anyway. But again, 9 out of 10, I think it really deserves that score, and I definitely highly recommend this Fire Emblem game to all who love Fire Emblem, or those who are looking for some Switch titles or or just a fun tactical RPG in general. So that's pretty much it for my review on Fire Emblem Engage. Hope you guys liked it. If you did, hit the thumbs up and hit the sub button if you haven't already. And I would say this is a pretty good strong start for 2023 when it comes to video games anyway. I'm definitely hoping and looking forward to all the announced DLC for Engage, but I hope to see more in the future. Make this a more of a long-term game, hopefully, but the nature of these games tend to just end after that one expansion pass, so it is what it is, but I kind of wish for more. That's how I feel about the game again. So all right, anyways, thank you very much and hope to see you all in the next video. Sean out.